What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, there are documents sitting in a courthouse that could completely change everything we thought we knew about the Brian Kohberger case? What if I told you that someone, somewhere, has been leaking information that was never supposed to see the light of day, and a judge is now demanding answers? And what if I told you that the victims themselves may have known they were being watched, stalked, and targeted weeks before that horrific night in November 2022? Well, that's exactly what's happening right now. The Brian Kohberger case just took another shocking turn, and today we're diving deep into the leaked court documents, the gag order violations, and the chilling new details that paint a terrifying picture of what really happened in Moscow, Idaho. But before we get into all of this, I need you to do something for me. If you're interested in true crime cases that are still developing, that are still revealing new secrets, then you need to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because this case is far from over, and you don't want to miss a single update. Now, let's talk about what's really going on behind closed doors in the Brian Kohberger case, because what I'm about to tell you will send chills down your spine. On November 13th, 2022, the world was introduced to one of the most horrific crimes in recent memory. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernadel, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. The case captivated the nation, not just because of the vicious nature of the crimes, but because for weeks, authorities seemed to have no leads, no suspects, and no answers. But then, on December 30th, 2022, everything changed when 28-year-old graduate student Brian Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. The criminology PhD student, who had been studying the very types of crimes he allegedly committed, became the prime suspect in a case that would dominate headlines for years to come. Fast forward to July 2025, and Brian Kohberger was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Case closed, right? Justice served? Not so fast, because that's when things got really interesting, and that's when the leaked documents started revealing secrets that nobody was prepared for. You see, what most people don't realize is that a criminal case doesn't end when someone is sentenced. There are always more documents, more evidence, more pieces of the puzzle that emerge afterward. And in the Kohberger case, those pieces are painting a picture that's somehow even more disturbing than we originally thought. The first bombshell came when hundreds of police documents were suddenly released after Kohberger's sentencing. These weren't just routine police reports. These were detailed investigative documents that revealed chilling new information about what happened in the weeks and months before the murders. And what they revealed was absolutely terrifying. According to these newly released documents, at least one of the victims had told friends she had a stalker. Think about that for a moment. A stalker. This wasn't a random attack by a stranger who happened to choose that house on that night. This was potentially the culmination of a pattern of stalking behavior that had been going on for weeks or even months. But it gets worse. The documents also reveal that in the weeks before the killings, one of the victims reported seeing a shadowy figure while walking her dog. A shadowy figure. Can you imagine living with that kind of fear? Looking over your shoulder every time you step outside? Wondering if someone is watching you, following you, planning something horrible. These details completely change our understanding of what happened. This wasn't just a crime of opportunity. This was potentially the end result of a calculated, methodical stalking campaign. And the victims may have known they were in danger. But here's where it gets even more complicated, and where the current controversy really begins. Because while these documents were officially released after Kohberger's sentencing, there are serious questions about whether other information has been leaking out inappropriately throughout the entire case. The judge overseeing the case has made it clear that he wants to identify anyone who may have violated the gag order that has been in place since 2023. A gag order, for those who might not know, is a court order that prohibits the parties involved in a case from discussing certain aspects of the case publicly. It's designed to ensure a fair trial, by preventing prejudicial information from being released to the media and the public. But according to recent reports, information about Kohberger's internet search history and other details have been featured on programs like Dateline, despite being under the protection of this gag order. The judge now wants a list of anyone who may have accessed this unreported information, and he's taking the potential violations very seriously. Kohberger's defense team has even sought a trial delay, citing these potential leaks and arguing that they violate the gag order that has been in place. They're claiming that their client's right to a fair trial has been compromised by information that should never have been made public. Now, you might be wondering why this matters so much. After all, Kohberger has already been sentenced to life in prison. The case is over, right? Well, not exactly. Because in our legal system, the integrity of the process matters just as much as the outcome. If information was improperly leaked, if gag orders were violated, if the process was compromised, then that could have implications for appeals and future proceedings. But let's talk about what these leaked documents and newly released information are actually telling us about the case itself, because the details are absolutely chilling. According to the released police documents, there were unusual incidents happening around the victims in the weeks and months before the murders. We're not just talking about the stalker reports and the shadowy figure sightings. We're talking about a pattern of behavior that suggests someone was carefully watching, studying, and potentially planning something horrible. The documents reveal that police had been investigating various incidents in the area that, in hindsight, may have been connected to Kohberger's alleged surveillance of his future victims. These weren't random crimes or coincidental events. They were part of what appears to have been a methodical preparation process. Think about this from the perspective of someone studying criminology, like Kohberger was. He would have known about crime patterns, about how investigations work, about how to potentially avoid detection. The released documents suggest that he may have been using his academic knowledge to plan and execute these crimes in a way that would make them harder to solve. But here's what's really disturbing about all of this. The victims may have sensed that something was wrong. They may have known they were being watched. They may have tried to report their concerns. And yet, tragedy still struck. This raises serious questions about how stalking reports are handled, how threats are investigated, and whether more could have been done to prevent this horrible crime. It also raises questions about the responsibility of academic institutions when graduate students studying criminology begin exhibiting concerning behavior. The leaked information also reveals details about Kohberger's internet search history that paint a disturbing picture of his mindset in the months leading up to the murders. While we can't go into all the specifics due to the sensitive nature of the information, what we can say is that his online activity was consistent with someone who was researching, planning, and preparing for violent crimes. This information was supposed to be protected under the gag order, but somehow it made its way into public reports and television programs. The judge's demand for a list of anyone who accessed this information suggests that he's taking these potential leaks very seriously, and that there may be consequences for whoever was responsible. But let's step back and think about the bigger picture here. What does all of this mean for our understanding of the case? What does it mean for the families of the victims? And what does it mean for the integrity of our legal system? First, the revelation that the victims may have been stalked before their deaths adds another layer of tragedy to an already horrific crime. It means that they may have lived in fear in their final weeks or months. It means that they may have tried to get help, tried to report their concerns, and still ended up being victims of the very crime they feared. For the families, these revelations must be incredibly difficult to process. Not only did they lose their children in the most horrible way imaginable, but now they're learning that their children may have known they were in danger. That has to be an unbearable additional burden to carry. And for our legal system, the potential gag order violations raise serious questions about how high-profile cases are handled. If information can be leaked despite court orders designed to prevent it, what does that say about the integrity of the process? What does that say about the ability of courts to control information in sensitive cases? The judge's response to these potential violations sends a clear message. The integrity of the legal process will be protected, even after a case has concluded. By demanding to know who may have violated the gag order, he's making it clear that there will be consequences for anyone who improperly released protected information. But there's another aspect to all of this that we need to consider, and that's the role of the media and the public's right to know. True crime content has exploded in popularity over the past decade, with podcasts, television shows, and YouTube channels dedicated to covering ongoing cases. The public has an insatiable appetite for details about high-profile crimes, and that creates pressure for information to be released, sometimes inappropriately. The Kohberger case became a media sensation from the very beginning, with every development covered extensively across multiple platforms. That level of attention can make it difficult to maintain the kind of information control that gag orders are designed to provide. But that doesn't excuse violations of court orders, and it doesn't justify the improper release of sensitive information. What we're seeing now with the leaked documents and potential gag order violations is the collision between the public's desire for information and the legal system's need to maintain the integrity of its processes. It's a tension that exists in many high-profile cases, but it's particularly acute in cases like this one, where the details are so shocking and the public interest is so intense. The newly released documents also reveal something else that's important to understand: the incredible amount of work that goes into investigating a case like this. We're talking about hundreds of pages of police reports, witness interviews, evidence collection records, and investigative notes. The level of detail and thoroughness is remarkable, and it shows just how seriously law enforcement took this case from the very beginning. But it also raises questions about what other information might still be out there, what other documents might still be sealed, and what other details we might learn in the future. The released documents represent just a portion of the total case file, and there are likely many more secrets still waiting to be revealed. For those of us who follow true crime cases, the Kohberger case represents something unique. It's a case where we got to see the investigation unfold in real time, where we witnessed the arrest, the trial, and the conviction as they happened. But now we're also getting to see the aftermath, the continued revelations, and the ongoing controversies that follow even after justice has been served. The leaked documents and potential gag order violations remind us that criminal cases are never really closed, at least not completely. There are always more questions to be answered, more details to be revealed, and more lessons to be learned. And in high-profile cases like this one, those revelations can continue for years after the crimes were committed. What's particularly striking about the Kohberger case is how it challenges our assumptions about random violence. The original narrative suggested that this was a random attack, a graduate student who snapped and committed horrific crimes against strangers. But the newly released documents suggest a much more calculated and methodical approach, with evidence of stalking, surveillance, and careful planning. This shift in understanding has implications beyond just this one case. It reminds us that predatory behavior often follows patterns, that criminals often engage in preparatory activities before committing their worst crimes, and that victims sometimes sense danger before it strikes. These are important lessons for law enforcement, for potential victims, and for society as a whole. The controversy over the leaked information also highlights the challenges of maintaining information security in our modern, connected world. With social media, 24-hour news cycles, and constant pressure for new information, keeping sensitive details private becomes increasingly difficult. The judge's response to these potential violations may serve as a warning to others involved in high-profile cases about the importance of respecting court orders and maintaining the integrity of the legal process. As we wrap up our discussion of these latest developments, it's important to remember that this case is still evolving. There may be appeals, there may be additional document releases, and there may be more revelations to come. The families of the victims are still processing their grief and trying to find some measure of peace, while the legal system continues to grapple with the implications of this case. The Brian Kohberger case will likely be studied for years to come, not just for the crimes themselves, but for how they were investigated, prosecuted, and covered by the media. The leaked documents and potential gag order violations add another layer to that story, reminding us that even after justice is served, the questions don't stop coming. What we've learned from these latest revelations is that the horror experienced by the victims may have been even worse than we originally understood. They may have known they were being stalked. They may have lived in fear. They may have tried to get help. And yet, tragedy still struck. That knowledge doesn't change the outcome of the case, but it does change our understanding of what happened. It makes an already tragic story even more heartbreaking, and it raises important questions about how we protect potential victims and how we investigate crimes in progress. The integrity of our legal system depends on following proper procedures, respecting court orders, and maintaining the confidentiality of sensitive information when required. The judge's response to the potential gag order violations in this case sends an important message about the consequences of failing to respect those requirements. As this case continues to unfold, one thing is certain. There are still more secrets to be revealed, more documents to be released, and more lessons to be learned. The Brian Kohberger case has become more than just a criminal prosecution. It's become a case study in how our legal system handles high-profile crimes, how information is controlled and released, and how the public's right to know must be balanced against the need for judicial integrity. For now, Brian Kohberger is serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole, and the families of his victims are trying to move forward with their lives. But the questions raised by this case, and the controversies surrounding the leaked information, will likely continue for years to come. And that's a reminder that in the world of true crime, the story is never really over.